that if a frozen waterfall can testify to the divinity of Jesus, anything can mean anything. He said he actually elaborated on this point. It is not a brilliant document. It is an appalling guide to morality.
Welcome back to another Sam Harris Clever Savage Comebacks reaction video from myself. Thank you for being here. Please click like and subscribe below, and I'm going to hit play right now.
This is often claimed, the idea that the Bible is just the best that was possible for that community in that period in history. You know, the 5th century BC was an age of such barbarism that Leviticus is really kind of it's like the U.S. Constitution, a brilliant document. It is not a brilliant document. It is an appalling guide to morality. And just think of how good a book. Just think of how good a book would be if it were authored by the creator of the universe. I mean, there's not a single sentence in any book of the Bible that could not have been written by somebody living in the Iron Age. This is a problem for claiming that this is the best book we have. And so the problem is, if you're living by Leviticus and Deuteronomy, you should be a good Jew for all time. Now, why are you not a good Jew for stoning your neighbor for working on the Sabbath today? You are not, because we have different standards of morality and reasonableness, and we happily do, and those came from outside of religion. So, in closing, I just want to remind you of why religion can't be the answer to the question of moral truth. Well, first, there's just the simple fact that all of our scriptures were written by people who, by virtue of their placement in history, had less access to scientific knowledge and what is now basic common sense than any person in this room. In fact, there's not a person in this room who has ever met a person whose worldview is as narrow as the worldview of Abraham or Moses or Jesus or Muhammad. These people knew nothing, next to nothing, that is now, of the facts that are now relevant to us in the 21st century. They knew nothing about the origins of life, the relationship between mind and brain. They didn't know that mental illness was even a category of human suffering. They knew nothing about DNA or viruses or computation or electricity. None of this is in Scripture. Okay, they had no idea why people got sick and died. I mean, unless you saw someone stabbed with a spear, you had no idea why they died. And in moral terms, with a few notable exceptions, most of these people were no wiser than your average Afghan warlord today.
Oof.
Okay, the most had absolutely no notion that slavery was problematic, that there was something morally unsavory about owning people and treating them like farm equipment. Okay, Jesus and his apostles couldn't see that slavery was worth condemning. In closing, I just want to suggest to you that just as we don't have Christian physics, though the Christians invented physics, and we don't have Muslim algebra, though the Muslims invented algebra, we at some point will not have Christian and Muslim morality. Okay, the truth has to float free of these provincial ideas. What remains for us to discover are all the facts that relate to genuine questions of human well-being. And the goal clearly is to build a global civilization based on shared values. Now, it seems to me the only tool we need to do that is honest and open inquiry. And if faith is ever right about anything in this space, it's just right by accident. Thank you very much.
Damn. Thank you, sir.
I think the best way to address the compatibility of science and religion is in the person of Francis Collins. I don't know if you know him. He ran the Human Genome Project for the U.S. He's a medical geneticist, obviously a scientist with a great career in science, and he's also an evangelical Christian. And he's written a book entitled The Language of God, where he claims to square his evangelical Christianity with the last 50 years of molecular biology and argue successfully that God exists. We know this based on scientific principles, and Jesus is his son. Now, I can't say that he's not a scientist, But what I can say is that the place in his book where he tells you when his doubts were truly removed, his conversion experience, testifies to the way the human mind can be partitioned, where a scientist can lapse in the most egregious way in terms of his scientific standards. And because the passage goes like this: I was hiking in the Cascade Mountains and came upon a beautiful frozen waterfall, and my doubts were removed, and I fell to my knees in the dewy grass and surrendered myself to Christ. It's virtually verbatim. So I would suggest to you that it should be obvious to all of you, and it certainly should have been obvious to Francis Collins, that if a frozen waterfall can testify to the divinity of Jesus, anything can mean anything. He said he actually elaborated on this point in an interview for Time magazine. He said the waterfall was frozen in 3 streams, and this put him in the mind of the Trinity. Okay, this is psychotic thinking in any other context. Worse. It's exactly what we do with Elvis. I mean, or astrology, or anything else that gets laughed off the dais. I mean, just
by the way, when he says Elvis, he means I believe he means the conspiracy that Elvis is still alive and being hidden somewhere, or maybe he's on the moon with Hitler and other historical figures. Julius Caesar, why not, right? I think that's what he's talking about.
Imagine if, or it's what we do with any other god but the God of Abraham. Imagine a political candidate who was forthcoming about his belief in Poseidon. It would be a problem. He could not possibly get elected. It's not like someone has proved that Poseidon doesn't exist. I mean, that is Russell's teapot. You cannot prove that Poseidon doesn't exist. The question is there any good reason to believe he exists? The answer is no. It's the same answer for the God of Abraham. The place to put our faith is in human conversation. I mean, this is all we have to work with. And the choice is to have a truly modern 21st century conversation, availing ourselves of all of the tools and all of the wealth of human effort that is our legacy. Or we can fixate our conversation in a prior century. It can be the 7th century if you're a Muslim. It can be the 5th century BC if you're a Jew. And we can privilege a conversation that was had then among people who could barely see the wisdom of swapping out their child for a goat in a sacrifice. And dignify their claims to understanding reality with some kind of special prescience. And I think we should be very leery of doing that, given what we see about us in the name of religion.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for destroying us. All right, that was Sam Harris, Best Comebacks. I'm coming back at you with more. Please click like and subscribe below, and then we can get going on the next video. Thank you.